Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've actually uploaded a video, and I apologize for that. I took a little bit of a break to handle some things in my personal life, but you've all been really patient, and I really do appreciate that. But speaking of things that are long overdue, here's my review for Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods. You remember how good the first Shazam movie was? How it told this really kind of heartwarming story about Billy finding this found family and coming together and learning to love them. I think of how great the relationship was between Billy and Freddy, or that scene where Shazam saves Mary and she's like conflicted because she has to decide between going to the school that she's worked so hard to get into, but it meaning that she would have to leave her family that she's grown to love behind. Or especially the scene where Billy goes to meet his birth mother. That one hurt so much, man. That was a powerful scene, and they balanced it so well with some genuinely pretty good humor. I think of, you know, the bit where Billy and Freddy go to a convenience store to buy beer, because it like really plays into the fact like, hey, these are kids who are in this strange situation because now they can turn into superheroes, or I guess in that scene in particular just Billy. But and then they like go to a strip club, or you know that bit where Dr. Savannah's giving like this big evil like monologue, but Shazam can't hear him because he's like a mile away and they're way up in the air. It was really funny. It was a good time. Like, that movie really reminded me of like the Raimi Spider-Man movies or the Goonies, those like older, like late 90s, early 2000s sort of coming of age, like just one generation removed from Kids on Bikes sort of movies. And that was really great. I really love that. Was it a perfect movie? Of course not. But you know what it was a lot better than? Shazam 2. It really feels like between the first one and this that they've decided to remove almost everything that made the first Shazam movie as good as it was and accentuate all of the problems that it had. And in my opinion, the worst aspect of this is shown through how they treat the characters in Shazam 2. Now, of course, there's some standout characters who do a really great job and rise above the writing of the movie. Like, for example, I think Freddy is phenomenal in this. Both Adam Brody and Jack Dylan Grazer, but especially Jack Dylan Grazer, do an amazing job in this movie, right? Freddy's parts of this movie feel like they're kind of the only good parts of this movie, and they form the emotional core of it. It to the point where Freddy kind of feels like the main character of Shazam 2. And like, his younger version does get annoying. There, he does the same stuff that he did in the first movie, where he just like goes on weird tangents and is kind of annoying. But you can chalk that up to the writers just like not really knowing how to write kids correctly. So I can't blame Jack Dylan Grazer for that. I think he like I said, really rises above the writing of this movie. He's so good in this. Like, some of his scenes are the most emotional and like well done scenes of the entire movie. I cannot put enough praise on Jack Dylan Grazer in this. I also really liked the Wizard. I think his name is Jimin Hounsou, the actor. I'm sure that I pronounced it wrong, but I think he's also very good in this. He's part of the only comedy of this movie that I genuinely laughed at, especially the stuff where he's with Freddy. I do wish that his character had an actual name, because they just call him the Wizard the whole time, and that feels weird. And I think in the first movie he said his name was Shazam, but he Shazam and Zachary Levi's character is Shazam, so like that's kind of weird. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Big fan. I think the Wizard was good in this. Grace Carolyn Curry as Mary Marvel does a good job. She's one of the only actors in this that gets any real screen time, probably by and large because she's the only one who gets to be the same actor or actress between her kid version and her adult version is the same actress. So that gives her more time to be able to, be appreciated, I guess. But, and she doesn't get a lot of value to do. And honestly, a lot of the writing for her is either stupid or in some points a little bit creepy, but she really does make the best of it, and I appreciate her for that. And unfortunately, I also think that Asher Angel's version of Billy Batson is also very good. The reason I say unfortunately is because he's only on screen for about 45 seconds in the entire movie. Like, they just basically completely remove him, despite the fact that Asher Angel was, I think, unarguably one of the better parts of the first Shazam movie, and yet he's barely in the sequel. They completely pushed him to the side in service of giving us more super cringy Zachary Levi, who's completely awful in this. Like, he's honestly the worst part of this movie is Zachary Levi's acting, which is weird for me to say because up until this movie, I really liked Zachary Levi. I like him in Chuck. I like him in Tangled. I do think he's a talented actor, but you would not know it from this movie. You know, it's really weird because I feel like he's actively worse in this than he was in the first movie, where especially when you compare him to Asher Angel, like they feel like two entirely different characters, and they did feel that way in the first movie, but less so. So this is one of those situations where it feels like they're really accentuating the bad aspects of the first movie, where in this one, Asher Angel, for the limited amount of time that he gets on screen, he feels like a fairly mature, like more serious kid, and then he switches over to Zachary Levi, and it's like he's playing a 12-year-old who's completely insane and like hyperactive, and it like they feel like two completely different personalities is what I'm getting at, right? And you know, honestly, the only positive that I really have for Zachary Levi in this is not even a positive of him himself. I think his suit looks better. they like took out a lot of the like fake muscle pads that he had in the first movie to make him look more like a real human being, and I also think just like the texture on it and the lightning bolt looks a lot better. So I really appreciated that. But when the biggest compliment that I have for an actor's performance in this is the suit that he was wearing, like that's not a good sign, you know? Because it felt like he was just ad-libbing for most of the movie, right? It genuinely, it felt like, or at least I hope it was ad-libbing, because I have to hope that some of those horrible, awful, cringy lines that he was delivering were not written by somebody, because that would kind of cause me to lose some faith in humanity, and I'm already pretty low on that at the moment, so can't really afford to lose any more of that. But it feels like whoever was writing him, if those lines were written, were like, I don't know, they weren't written for Billy Batson. It feels like they were written for some store brand Ryan Reynolds Deadpool knockoff. You know what I mean? Like it's not good. It's not good at all. And they give him the only serious bit that he gets really, other than the ending, which we'll get to, is they give him this like subplot where he's afraid that he's going to like age out of the foster system, but they don't do anything with that idea for the entire movie. It's literally at the beginning, he's like, or not even him, I think Mary says it. She's like, oh, you're worried because of this. And then at the end of the movie, somebody else is like, don't be worried about that. It's totally fine. And like, there's no playing with that concept or that theme anywhere else in the other like 2.5 hours of this movie. And it's insane. Zachary Levi is awful in this movie, which is a shame because he's the character we see the most of. So, but I guess somewhat in his defense, like the rest of the Shazam kids, I will not say Shazamily. I think that's a horrible phrase. It really irritates me. But the rest of the Shazam kids in this are not treated particularly well either. You know, Mary and Freddie sort of rise above it, and Billy at least gets a lot of screen time for him to play with. So that's something. Like those three have, like, they feel like they're characters in this movie. The other three, the other half of the Shazam kids, get nothing. It feels like they're just complete afterthoughts. So Eugene, Pedro, and Darla, neither their child form or their adult form, so 6 actors, are just completely wasted in this movie. They do absolutely nothing for the entire runtime, which was also true of the first movie, but we're now 2 movies into this and you couldn't find anything for half of your cast to do? Like, that's insane to me. And it doesn't help that the half that's not getting anything to do happens to be all 3 of the ones that aren't white, which, like, I'm sure that's not intentional. I'm not, coming out and saying that the writer, director, or whatever is racist, because if I had to guess, I think, the reason why Billy, Freddie, and Mary are getting more screen time is because for decades in the comics, those were the only three. As you had Captain Marvel, Mary Marvel, and and Captain Marvel Jr., who's Freddie. So those were the three, like, main Marvels, right? And so I understand why they would get more screen time. But two things: one, if those are the only characters that you're going to write anything for, then just use those three characters. Like I said, that's what it was in the comics for decades. If those are the only three characters that you want to use, then just use those three characters. Don't write in half of another half of doubling your cast and then do nothing with them, because that feels awful. And the other part of it is, like, look, man, if you're gonna have these people be here, you need to do something with them. Like, they start kind of giving Eugene something to do, where, like, it seems like he's been exploring the Rock of Eternity, but then they don't do anything with that. And Darla has a thing where she kidnaps a cat, and, like, that's it. That's all they get. It's really, really awful. We're 2 movies in, so we're, like, almost 6 hours of screen time with these kids, and I feel like I don't know who half of them are, and that's a real problem, and again, we're not really getting any time to spend with these kids as kids, right? And that's a problem with all of them, with the exception of Mary, I guess. Mary and Freddie get a lot of time with them as, like, their kid actors, although, to be fair, again, Mary's actress is the same for the kid version and the adult version. So we see a lot of those two doing actual, like, plot relevant things as their child actors. But the other 4, we barely see anything of it. And that sort of robs this movie of a lot of what makes the Shazam family special. Some of the most interesting aspects of the Shazam kids is that they are kids. So you get that extra level of, like, fear and inexperience that comes with the fact that these are actual literal children who are risking their lives to be superheroes. They started because they're like, I get to be a superhero, this is so cool. But then at a certain point, it's like, this is real life and this is scary. And that's something that's always been really cool about these characters in the comics, or even honestly in the first movie. They do a better job of it than this, wherein, like, the villains of this movie, we see the kids so little that there's scenes where they're all just sitting around talking about, like, their plans for what they're going to do next time or whatever, and they're all in their superhero form. Like, it would be so easy to just swap them out for their child actors so that we could be reminded, oh yeah, that's right, these are children. And it gets to the point where one of the objectives of the villains in this movie is that they are trying to steal the magic back from the kids. So they're trying to steal their powers. And because we have seen so little of the Marvels as their kid version, when they get their powers removed and they turn back into their kid form, it doesn't feel like they're having their powers stolen. It feels like they're being transformed into children, like Sky High. And speaking of the villains in this, they're also terrible, which is really disappointing looking at how they're cast. Because Helen Mirren, okay, an amazing actor. We all know that. Like, I don't have to sit here and tell you that Helen Mirren is good at her job. Everyone on the planet already knows that. But there's only so much she can do with material this bad. And I think she really tries, but just, like, maybe doesn't understand what's going on, which is totally fair, because me watching the movie didn't really understand what she was trying to do either. So it probably wasn't much clearer in the script. And the other two, Lucy Liu and Rachel Ziegler, because they played the Daughters of Atlas, which is a brand new group of villains. They're not from the comic books, which is totally fine by me. I'm all for creating new villains. I know that there's some people who are, like, really mad about that for some reason, which is crazy to me, but whatever. I genuinely think it's interesting to get brand new characters in new adaptations. I mean, that's how we got Harley Quinn, right? These are very clearly not on that level or anywhere near that level. The Daughters of Atlas are terrible. But yeah, anyway, so Lucy Liu and Rachel Ziegler played the other two Daughters of Atlas. And, they might be good actors or actresses. I don't know anything about Rachel Ziegler. Lucy Liu I've seen in a bunch of stuff, and I've never really particularly cared for her as an actress. But I don't know, she's popular, so she must be at least decent. But it really feels like both of them are phoning it in here, which I guess I can't really blame them for, because it's just not a good movie. Like, I don't think that they at any point expected it to do well. Also, their actions and motivation don't make any sense. I'm not going to talk spoilers yet. We'll get to that pretty soon, but I'll let you know before we start. But yeah, their motivation and the actions that they take, especially Lucy Liu's actions, make no sense whatsoever. And it's just like, oh, we're just here to be evil because we're the bad guys. Their power sets are insanely convoluted, and also inconsistent. Like, Helen Mirren's character, her name is Hespera, something like that. It's Greek. And she says, I have the power of the elements, which for some parts makes a lot of sense. Like, right at the beginning, and I think this is in one of the trailers, she like turns people to stone. She basically cakes stone onto them so that they turn into statues, kind of like a Pompeii sort of situation. And that's really cool. Like, I think visually that's probably one of the coolest things in this movie. And then later we see her grab some metal bars and like heat them with her hands. So we've got like stone and fire. So like totally those are elements, no problem, get that. But then she spends most of the rest of the movie just like using telekinesis and super strength, and it's like, those are not your powers. like telekinesis, like, I don't know, telekinesis is not an element. Like, she's moving people around for some of it, so like you could maybe argue that she's using the water in people's blood, like Avatar The Last Airbender style. That's what the friend who I went to go see it with said, but even he was like, that's kind of a stretch. So yeah, I don't know, like, it didn't feel good. Lucy Liu, her character is named Calypso, I think, and her power is chaos, which is already, just as a name, incredibly vague. And at one point it kind of makes sense because she can like whisper in people's ears and then they freak out and do whatever she basically tells them to do, which doesn't sound like chaos. It sounds like mind control or whatever, but whatever. But then after one or two scenes of her doing that, she's basically just shooting power beams around for most of the movie, which is just really boring. If your power is chaos, I feel like you can think of something more interesting to do with it. And then Rachel Ziegler, I don't even really know what her power is, because her character's name is Anthea, who is not, I don't think, a real character from mythology, or I already told you she's not from the comic books, but I also don't think she's from Greek mythology. And they say that her power is axis, but I could never tell if they were saying axis, like a rotational point or whatever, or access, like to get into a place, and her power doesn't really clear that up, because all it is that it looks like, I mean, you've seen it in the trailer, is that she can like inception buildings around and like make them form and twist and stuff, and you could make the argument that that's either axis or access. So I don't even know, dude. Like, if I had watched it with subtitles, maybe I would know, but I don't. So I have no idea what's going on with any of them, and they're just not really effective villains. Like, I was never invested in any of them, except maybe Anthea a little, because she has like a subplot where some more characters type stuff happens, but I don't know. And then the other aspect of it is, speaking of their powers, is a lot of the effects in this movie look really, really bad. Like, really bad. There's a couple of good ones. Like I said, the suits look better across the board. All of the Shazam kids' suits look better than the first movie. I even think the Daughters of Atlas suits are fine to good. Like, I've got no real problem with them. The Rock of Eternity, we see a lot more of it in this than we did in the first movie, and it looks really cool. I wish we spent more time there, honestly, because it feels like it'd be a really cool sort of place to explore, but we don't really get basically any of it in terms of like actual useful information. But if you've seen the trailer, then you've seen that dragon, and man, in every shot of that dragon that is not in that trailer, it looks awful, just so bad. Like, there's a bit where Lucy Liu is riding it for like half the movie, and she doesn't, like, you can tell so clearly that they are completely separate things, green screen together. Speaking of which, there's also a bit where Lucy Liu's character like walks out onto a baseball field, and it is one of the worst green screen jobs I think I've ever seen. Like one of the most apparent she's not in this location shots I've ever seen in a movie, at least in the last, I don't know, 10 years or something. And it's like, really? Like, you did that bad of a job for her to walk out on a baseball field? Like, you couldn't put her in a real field and then just, like, green screen stadium seating in the background? Or, like, just put her in the actual real Philadelphia baseball stadium? Like, you couldn't have done that for one shot? Like, oh, man. Especially considering how much this movie takes place there, you would think that they would make a better attempt to make that look good, but they sure don't. And then there's like other monsters that pop up throughout this movie as part of just what the villains are doing. And every single one of them looks like video game models from at least a full generation ago, maybe two. Like, they look really bad. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame because honestly, they don't use a ton of effects in this. You know, a lot of it is just people in suits like sitting outside at some hot dog shop, you know, like there's a lot of scenes of this movie where there are no effects going on whatsoever. So you would think that for the few that actually have something, that they would be able to put more budget or more talent behind it, but it sure doesn't look like it or feel like it. And that really sucks. Okay, now let's talk spoilers for a little bit. So if you're worried about spoilers, use the timestamp, skip ahead to the conclusion. I'm going to assume that anyone who's watching this next section has either already seen the movie or doesn't care. So, first of all, what I want to do is just go back and big up Jack Dylan Grazer again. Genuinely, this is my biggest takeaway from this movie, is that Jack Dylan Grazer is an amazing actor and hopefully will go good places after this, because he's got chops, he's got range, whatever you want to say, he's got that talent, right? So many good scenes with this kid. When Lucy Liu makes the teacher who's Rex Kwon Do from Napoleon Dynamite, when she makes him kill himself, the reaction that Freddy gives is really strong, like really good. All of the scenes with him and the wizard joking around was really fun. Him with Anthea at school was genuinely really cute, even despite how poorly written it was. And then, of course, it gets really gross when you find out that she's like a 3,000-year-old god and he's, like 16, 17? Like, it's really weird and gross. The bit where he's fighting off the chaos power that Lucy Liu whispers into his ear is really good. Him facing down the dragon with Anthea and like holding his crutch out like a sword to fight this dragon. And then at the very end, when Billy dies and he's crying over the body, like, so many really good scenes with this kid, despite how bad the movie is. There are so, like, basically every standout moment of this movie is a Jack Dylan Grazer moment. And I'm so impressed by him. He really, I'm sure he's been in stuff before this, but this is really the only thing I personally know him from. And I'm a big fan. Like, whatever he crops up in next, I'm going to be that much more interested to go see it. I'm genuinely really, really impressed by just everything he's done. He genuinely kind of saves this movie a little bit for me. But yeah, let's get into the gripes, because this movie has some really bad writing, and so I've got one very minor gripe, and then I want to talk about how bad the entire third act is. So real fast, in the first movie, we see that Shazam and the Shazam kids can use the Room of Doors in the Rock of Eternity to go anywhere on Earth. They just have to think about where to go, right? So they just walk through a door in the Room of Doors and it will take them where they need to go, right? We've seen them do that in the first movie, and that's how they like wind up back in a strip club. And there's the really funny bit where Mary's like, really, anywhere on Earth, and you pick the strip club. And like, it's a good bit. The villains of this movie trap the people of Philadelphia in Philadelphia with a dome, like Simpsons style, right? So couldn't the Shazam kids have just evacuated everyone out of Philadelphia through the Rock of Eternity. They wouldn't even have to like corral all the people up together. They could literally show up in a person's house through their closet door, take them into the Rock of Eternity, and then open another door and take them to New York or anywhere else. Really, like wherever they need to go, wherever their family is, right? They could have really solved this problem so fast if they had just thought about it at all. Which, like, okay, whatever, they're kids, I'll let it fly. But it was definitely something that I was thinking about the whole time that was really bothering me. Anyway, let's talk about that third act, because that was awful. So bad. So terrible. Like, ugh. Okay, so I'm counting the third act from starting from when Lucy Liu betrays her sisters for literally no reason, right? So she uses the dragon, who is, I guess, more loyal to her than the other sisters, to stab Helen Mirren, who bleeds out for a laughably long time before finally dying, presumably. And she does it for no reason. Like, there's absolutely no setup for it, because now that she's got the seed of life or whatever, and they're like, cool, we can take this back to, we have everything we need. We have won our goal. We have accomplished everything we need to do. We just take this back, plant it back in our home planet or dimension or whatever, and then our planet comes back and everything's back to normal, and we win. We got what we wanted. And I understand why they couldn't do that, because then the movie would just end without like any satisfying final fight or whatever. And so, you know, maybe that wasn't the best thing to set up. But then to have her just for no reason throw away everything that they've been working for, seemingly just out of spite, with, again, no buildup, no reason for why she would feel different than the other two sisters. We don't see any of that backstory of like why Calypso is more insane than the others. Like, nothing, just absolutely nothing. There's no reason for why she does that. But so she instead takes, after betraying Hespera and seemingly killing her, thinking that she's killed her, she takes the apple, the seed of life, and plants it at whatever the stadium that the Phillies play in is called. And it grows this big tree, and then all these monsters come out, and they like birth out of these fleshy pods, these Greek monsters of myth for some reason, just like spawn into the world fully grown, which, sure, whatever, it's a dumb comic book movie, I'll let it slide. But so now all these monsters are running around Philadelphia, killing all the people who should have evacuated through the Rock of Eternity, but I'm letting that go. And now the rest of the kids, everyone who's not Billy, and who at this point in the movie does not have any superpowers, are tasked with fighting these monsters. And the movie forgets that they're kids. At no point does anyone acknowledge, like, these are children, and this is not something that children should be doing. Like, it's incredibly irresponsible for the parents to let them do this. It's irresponsible for Billy Shazam, who still has his powers, to let the rest of the kids do this. Like, it's entirely insane for anyone to think that this was the proper solution. So the kids somehow come to the conclusion, or I think they talk to the wizard, and they're like, what are these monsters afraid of? And he's like, they're afraid of the king of the beasts, the biggest, baddest monster that's ever existed. And me, being a comic book fan, and because they set it up earlier, I'm remembering Tawny. I'm remembering that earlier in the movie, Darla stole a cat for fucking some reason, and named it Tawny. And if you don't know, in the comic books, Tawny is an ally of the Shazam family, a pretty important character who is this tiger who basically is also imbued with the power of Shazam. The backstory of the character changes throughout a lot of different, like, wildly different, like, sometimes it's basically just a normal tiger, other times it's a He-Man style battle cat, other times it's a fully anthropomorphic tiger man in a green pinstripe suit. Like, this character changes a lot throughout different characters, like different adaptations and different versions of Tawny. But because they set this up, I'm going, okay, they're bringing back Tawny, that's going to be cool. We're going to get that version in this universe. Cool. Like, I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing this. And that wasn't just me being a comic book fan, like, pulling this out of my ass. Like, they genuinely set it up. They had her steal the cat and name it Tawny, and like this whole thing, and then they don't do that at all. No, of course not. Why would they do the thing that makes sense and would be satisfying for fans of the property? No. Instead, the king of the beasts, the one thing that these monsters of Greek myth are afraid of is English unicorns. Monsters from a completely different mythology that don't interact in, I think, any stories that I can think of. For some reason, they're afraid of unicorns. I don't understand. I don't understand how we got here. You know, like, combining those two groups of mythology, it's not the biggest thing in the world. You know, it's a little annoying. You know, it's like when your dad is under the impression that Dumbledore is both the character from Harry Potter and the character from Lord of the Rings. Like, he thinks that's the same guy. Like, it's on that level of, like, this doesn't make sense and we probably shouldn't have done this. But whatever. I wouldn't even be mad about unicorns being in it if they hadn't made me think that it was going to be Tawny instead. And so, you know, maybe that's my own hang up that I'm getting stuck on here, but it really, really irritated me. And then on top of that, not only is the King of the Beast unicorns, so that we can ride unicorns, I guess, but the way that they have to, like, domesticate, I guess would be the word, these unicorns, is that Darla throws Skittles at them because the wizard is like, oh, what are unicorns like? How do we get them to be our friends? He's like, well, they really like ambrosia, which again doesn't make sense because ambrosia is Greek and unicorns are English, but whatever. And he's like, it's like honey, it's, you know, sugary sweet. And so Darla's like, well, I got a pocket full of Skittles. I throw these Skittles at this unicorn. It ain't no problem. And then she does, and for some reason it works in what has got to be like top 10 worst product placement scenes in any movie ever. It works. And I think she's even like, taste the rainbow, and then they like cut her off because she's a kid and she's not allowed to drop the one F-bomb of a PG-13 movie. Although genuinely I don't remember if they do one in this movie. They very well could, but not important. So they do that, and then they ride all these unicorns to sort of corral all of the Greek monsters of myth, and they surround them in the middle of this park, like in a fountain, which is already kind of stupid because it's like, okay, we somehow ran through all of Philadelphia and cornered all of the monsters that were spread throughout the entire city in one place. But on top of that, we're on horses, effectively, and half of these monsters that are now surrounded by us have wings. Like, how... They just have a circle of horses around these, like, harpies and chimeras and junk who have wings, and we have seen them fly throughout the rest of the time that they've been in this movie, but they're like, oh, unicorns, I better stay on the ground, or something. Like, what's going on? Like, what? Why would... I don't know if I assume harpies work like birds. The first thing they do when they're scared is they fly away. Like, they're gonna go up and hide in a tree or at the top of a building or something. They're not gonna be like, oh, I should put myself in a situation surrounded by all of these minotaurs and cyclopses or whatever. Like, I understand them getting screwed over by the unicorn. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just so stupid. And meanwhile, while the kids are doing this, Zachary Levi is having one of the most bland third act superhero fights of all time. Like, they just literally, I mean, I guess visually it's kind of cool because there's lightning going off, but they literally, it's him versus Lucy Liu riding on the dragon that doesn't breathe fire, and they just sort of fly at each other. I think they hit each other once, and then they go opposite ways, and then they come back the other way. And the idea of it is that Billy has come up with this genius idea to have Helen Mirren, who hasn't died yet, shrink the dome to be just around the baseball stadium so that he can, like, charge up the wand with extra magic so that he can basically suicide bomb Lucy Liu, which, like, we got to that conclusion really fast. It feels like we probably could have thought of a better a better strategy here that didn't involve killing a child, but whatever. Who am I to say let's not kill a child? And so he blows himself up and he wins the fight, and it's this, like, genuinely pretty good scene where first Freddy and then the rest of the family are, like, crying over Billy's body, and it's really powerful moment. I was, like, starting to feel things, even though it was, like, not really super well earned, but, like, it was genuinely a good scene. I was having a good time there, and then they completely failed to commit to it, which is like, okay, then why did you kill him in the first place? Because in what had to have been less than 2 minutes later of screen time, they just bring him right back. They have this incredibly forced, super awkward, like cameo ex machina, where the wizard is holding the staff and he's like, well, we could do some really cool stuff if there was a god here. And then Wonder Woman just shows up. Her music plays insanely loud. It might have just been my theater, but insanely loud, completely blows the entire sound mixing of the scene. Walks in, grabs the staff, brings him back. They have exchanged like 2 lines, I think, back and forth, and then she's gone. And that's her entire role in the movie. And it's like, oh my God. Like, it's so awkward and so bad. I don't mind the idea of a Wonder Woman cameo or her even being in this movie. Like, this whole movie is about Greek myth and the daughter of Atlas. Genuinely, it feels more like a Wonder Woman movie than a Shazam movie. I think she should have been in most of this movie. Like, she shouldn't even been a cameo. She should have just been in this movie. She could have fought the monsters while Shazam went off and fought Lucy Liu. Like, that would have made sense because she's theoretically fought some Greek monsters of myth before. Like, that seems to be a thing that I could have imagined her having done. She certainly does it in the comic books a lot. I don't know about this particular version of her, I guess, but whatever. But instead, she's just like a joke throughout a couple sections of the movie where he's like having a dream where he's on a date with her. Like, they're talking about how hot she is in one scene. And then she just shows up for 2 seconds, brings him back to life, and whatever. And that's just it. And it sucks. Like, here's my thought, right? Here's how this scene could have worked so much better is, what if it had been Freddy instead who charged up the wand and exploded, and then he stayed dead? That would hurt so much more. It would explain why he felt like he was the main character of this movie, because he's the one who's going to make the heroic sacrifice at the end. It would have been so good. And then he stays dead. He's not a super important character. He's only Captain Marvel Jr. There's all these other kids, and it could really like galvanize them together into like, we need to stop messing around. We need to be like a proper team and really get this done. Although genuinely, they don't even seem like they're that bad at it, despite the fact that the movie calls them the Philly Fiascos for the whole movie. They seem like they're honestly not that bad at all. But it would have been so much better. But instead, the way that they chose to do it is just like, so we're gonna play with your heartstrings for approximately 30 seconds and then immediately throw this entire idea away. And maybe it's because of some of the stuff that's going on in the MCU with like multiversal stuff, where it feels like in these comic book movies, things just don't have weight anymore, where people they don't stay dead, or we get a new version of them. Like, we got Gamora back really fast after she died, and we got Groot back, and like, all of this kind of stuff. Now with the introduction of the multiverse, like, theoretically there's an infinite number of every character. Like, even though Robert Downey's Tony Stark is dead, he could show up at any time, and it's, I don't know. So maybe this just rubs me the wrong way because of all of that. Like, if you're going to do something dramatic, like kill your main character or even kill a main character, then commit to it for at least a little while. You don't have to leave them dead forever. I get it. It's a kid. So like, maybe don't kill them at all if it's literally a child. But if you're going to do it, then do it. Don't half-ass it and bring them back 2 seconds later. It just, oh my God, this whole third act was just awful. Just awful. Hated every second of it. All right. Welcome back, people who didn't want to see the spoiler section. So, my general thoughts of Shazam 2 is, it was a bad movie. Like, really bad. But it was sort of saved by having some really good moments that, if transplanted into a better movie, could have even been great. And shout out to some of the really great performances from people like Jack Dylan Grazer, Grace Carolyn Curry, and Asher Angel. I really do genuinely hope that all 3 of those actors go on to do great things in the future. And I think between their hard work and a couple of those good scenes that were made good by and large through their talent, I think this movie, Shazam 2: Fury of the Gods, manages to barely scrape out a 6 out of 10. I don't recommend anybody go to a theater to see this. I had a really good time seeing it because I was watching it with one of my best friends, and we watch a lot of really bad movies together. So to be fair, we could probably have a good time watching just about anything. But I don't think that that's going to be everyone's experience. This was not a good movie. Wait for it to show up on HBO Max, or I don't know, maybe at the absolute most, I would say like rent it from Redbox or something. Like if you just really have to know what happens or just want to see how bad it is for yourself. This is not a movie that I think we're going to be talking about after this, or at least I certainly hope not. So yeah, it was a rough one. So there you have it. There's all my thoughts on Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods, and I would love to hear what all of you guys thought about it down in the comments below. I even suspect that probably there's a good number of you who genuinely really enjoyed it, and I'm happy for you. I wish that I had enjoyed it more, frankly, and I would love to hear why it was that you guys did or didn't like it down there. But thank you all for stopping by. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded on this channel, but I needed a break for a number of reasons. I will be more consistent in the future, probably not to the point of a video every week, but maybe every other week, hopefully, is what I'm shooting for. And if you want to support me putting videos out more often, the best thing you can do is like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, ideally, share it with some friends. The faster this channel grows, the more invested I can become in it, especially once we hit that 1,000 mark and I can start making a little bit of money off of it. It will really, really help me out. So please, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, it would genuinely mean a lot to me. But until next time, I'll see you around.